Progress.
Okay, we're up to Daf 10a-10b. We're 7 lines from the bottom. Tan Rabbanon. Tell him to keep it down. Tan Rabbanon is a brisa. The brisa describes the differences between the avos nezikin. So Tan Rabbanon, Chomer b'shar mibebar. In some ways, a shar is more severe in punishment and in halacha than a bar. Chomer b'bar mibeshar, but in some ways a bar is more chomer than a shar. How so? We'll just run through these. Chomer b'shar mibebar. A shar has stringencies that a bar does not. What are the stringencies that a shar has that a bar does not? Shashar mishali misakofer. That if a shar gores a person and kills him, there's a penalty that you have to pay called a kofer. That's a penalty based on the person's value. That does not apply to a bar. If a person dies in a bar, there is no kofer. V'chayiv b'shloishim shel. And if a shar, instead of killing a person where you pay a kofer, the shar kills an eved kanani, you pay what's called shloishim shel. It's a 30 shekel penalty, which again does not apply to a bar. Nigmar dinai, if a shar kills someone and then is found guilty in court, we know the halacha is it's aser b'hana. So aser b'hana, which you do not obviously have by a bar. A bar is not aser b'hana, it's never found guilty in court. And a shar goes to attack. A bar is stationary, and it's not darker leilach hazik. Those are all stringencies that a shar has that a bar does not have. But what does a bar have that a shar does not have? What is stringency about a pit? That does not apply to an ox. A bar, from the moment it's created, its intention is it's a damage from the beginning. It never has a time of like peace. A shar, as a little baby, it's not aggressive. It only gets mazik as it gets older. But a shar bar was created. It was created in the beginning to be mazik. And we know that a bar, we know there's a special heter by a shar, by a keren of a shar, that a keren of a shar, the first 3 times you only pay half a nezek, and then after the 4th time do you pay nezek shalim. That does not apply to a bar. Bar tchilasai says a nezek. Umuad mitchilasai. From the moment a bar is created, any damage you pay full price. It's a muad mitchilasai. Masha'en came b'shar, which does not apply to a shar. Okay, that's the first part of the brisa. Second part of the brisa, choymer b'shar mibe'esh. Now we're going to compare a shar to eish and vice versa. A shar has stringencies that eish does not, and they're very similar to what we had before. First of all, a shar pays koifer if it kills a person. It pays shloishim shel 30 shekels for killing a Canaanite slave, which does not apply to fire. And again, once it's found guilty, it's asabahana. You can't benefit from the carcass of a shar. Now, this is the one thing, or another stringency, and this is why we bring it up. Masru l'cheres shaita v'katan chayiv. As we said yesterday, that was the end of yesterday's daf. If you give a cheres shaita v'katan, a shar, and then it does damage, you're chayiv, because you're negligent. Masha'en kin be'esh, as opposed to fire, as we said yesterday, according to Machlokes, Rav Yechon Rish Lakish, what type of fire? But bekitzer, by a fire, there is a heter that if you give it to a cheres shaita v'katan, you are not chayiv. That's the stringencies of shar over eish. Now, what is stringencies that eish has over shar? The stringency that eish has is that it's a muad from the beginning, as opposed to a shar where you pay half price for the first 3 times by Karen. The Gemara continues. Now we compare an eish to bar and vice versa. In some ways, a pit is more stringent than fire. How so? Right? The moment its inception, the moment it was created, it's made and it's prone to do damage. Which is interesting that it's saying as opposed to fire. I guess fire in the beginning is not out of control. I guess in the beginning. Yeah. I guess fire in the beginning, right? Fire, it's not the creation that does it; it's the pointing in the direction. As opposed to a pit, from its inception, it has no purpose other than doing damage. No one, a pit in Main Street, that's all it does. If you give over a pit to guard to a chereshet v'katan, you're chayiv because you're negligent. As opposed to a fire, as we said yesterday, it's potter. But what is how is an eish more stringent than a bar? First of all, fire travels to damage as opposed to a bar, which is stationary. And this next line is interesting. Put this in your back mind of what this next line is. You're chayiv by eish, whether it consumes davar haroiloi, something that it's meant to consume, bein davar she'ein roiloi. You're chayiv by eish, whether it consumes something it's meant to consume, which is firewood, or something it's not meant to consume. Now, what that means, put a question mark, we'll figure out what that means. Mashein came a bar. A bar, whatever that is, that a eish is chayiv, you're exempt by a bar. So there's something that a bar is potter, that an eish is chayiv. We don't really know what this means yet, and the Gemara will elaborate. Okay, so here's the question. The question is, and this we're going to deal with until the two dots, there are some things that are missing from this. And then you always have the question of, is it intentionally missing? Is it ton of a shire? Maybe the brisa was just not comprehensive. And then, well, if it's not comprehensive, what else is it missing? You got to go through that game. So, Velisni, I have something else you could add in the category of shar being more severe than a bar. Chayme b'shar mebar, which we had, a shar is shalishim shalevet, kaifer v'chule. Shashar chayiv bayas hakelim. If a shar gore is kalim, it's chayiv. Masha'in came babar as opposed to a bar. Now, what this is referring to is, this is later on in the Masechta, it's a machlokes tanoim. If an ox falls into a bar and it hurts himself, and it has on its back, it also had a bottle of wine, it's a machlokes tanoim whether you're chayiv just for the ox or also for the bottle of wine, for the kalim. There are some opinions that hold you are exempt from the kalim. So now, it's based on psukim. Now, if you hold that you're exempt from the kalim, so think about it. You're chayiv by a shar if it gores and breaks a bottle of wine, you're chayiv, not a bar. So that's a stringency. So why is it omitted? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why it's omitted, because our brisa, Hamani Rav Yehuda, our brisa follows Rav Yehuda. I mentioned before, it's a machlokes tanoim, whether you're chayiv. If an animal falls into a pit and has kalim and it breaks the kalim, are you also chayiv for the kalim or just for the shar? So it's a machlokes tanoim. This brisa follows Rav Yehuda, the mechayiv on this kalim bebar. This brisa follows Rav Yehuda that you're chayiv on kalim. Therefore, it's not omitted because you're chayiv both by shar and by bar. So that means that this brisa is saying that if an animal falls into a pit with kalim on its back, it's a machlokes tanoim whether you're chayiv in the kalim. Our brisa follows Rav Yehuda that you're chayiv by a bar, and that's why it's not omitted. Now here's the problem. Go back to that line that was the cryptic line. There was a line that said that if fire consumes, it's chayiv whether it consumes davar haroyeloi, which is firewood, or davar she'ein royeloi. Now what is that question mark? Probably kalim. A bottle of wine, it's not normal, it's not meant for a fire to consume, and you're chayiv. Ma she'ein kain bar your potter. So you're telling me that the reason why that this brisa follows Rav Yehuda, that if a keli falls into a bar with an ox, that you're chayiv on the kalim, but isn't that question mark word, isn't it kalim, and you're chayiv by eish, but potter by bar? So there's a contradiction within the brisa. Am I chayiv by kalim by a bar? You're saying yes, and that's why it didn't omit that distinction between shar and bar, but isn't that line between bar and eish, isn't that referring to kalim, that eish is chayiv, bar is potter? So is bar chayiv and kalim or potter from kalim? It's a contradiction. So the Gemara says, Rav Yehuda, if you're telling me that our brisa follows Rav Yehuda, that you're chayiv on kalim that fell in a bar, ema seifa, then how do you expand the end of the brisa? What did the end of the brisa say? Chayme be'esh me be'bar. In some aspects, a fire is more stringent than a bar. How is a fire more stringent? She'esh darka leilach l'hazik, and eish travels, and now, this is the main key, muad la'echol, you're chayiv by eish, whether it's davar haroyeloi, whether it's something that's meant for fire, davar she'ein roya, or whether it's not meant for fire. Chayev by both, across the board by fire, masha'in came by bar. By a bar, you're potter on the second category. Now, what is this referring to? Davar haroy ma'niu. What is the item that's fit for a fire? That's eitzim, that's firewood. What's davar she'ein royaloi? What does it mean? Something that's not meant for fire. Ma'niu kalim. That's referring to kalim, right? So kalim is chayev by eish, masha'in came by bar. Davar she'ein royaloi ma'niu kalim, masha'in came by bar. So he's saying that by a bar is potter by kalim. So Rav Yehuda, so it's a contradiction in the brisa. Are you chayiv on kalim for a bar or not? So the Gemara answers, Lo'ilam Rabbanon. You know what? Our brisa follows the Rabbanon that you're potter from kalim in a bar. Oh, so if it's potter from kalim, that extends the end of the brisa. But now we have the original problem, which is, why did you not mention that distinction? That chaymer b'shar me'babar, because a shar is chayiv and kalim and bar is potter. If you're going with the opinion that you're potter by bar, then why is that not listed as the distinction between chaymer b'shar me'babar? The answer is ton of a shire. You're right, it could have been listed. Meaning, you found a very clever line that is omitted from the brisa, and the answer is, it was an accident. Ton of a shire. Our brisa was not comprehensive. Now, the rule throughout Shas, we've had many, many times, is that if you have a brisa, and then you say, why is this not listed? And then you say, well, the brisa just didn't omit it. It wasn't a comprehensive brisa. You got to bring me something else that was also omitted, because it's too convenient for you to just say that the one thing that's like a shaila, it omitted. Prove to me that it omitted B, and then I could understand why it also omitted A. But if the only thing it omitted is this, that's a little too convenient. So right now you're saying that it follows the Rabbanon that you're potter from Kalim. So why is it not listed? Ton of Hashire. So Mashire the Hashire. What else did the Brisa omit to show that it's not a comprehensive Brisa? So the Gemara says Shire Toman. You know what it omitted? It omitted Toman. Toman means that if you make a fire and you burn down the field, you're chayav for the field. Let's say inside the field, in the hay, you hid a tractor. For whatever reason, because it was concealed, you're potter on the kalim that are concealed in a fire. We'll deal with it later. It's based on psukim. That's omitted. That's not listed. So that's omitted. So it's not shver to say that it also omitted kalim being potter by a bar. Okay. So the Gemara says another answer to answer the contradiction. Really go with the original pshat, which is our brisa follows Rav Yehuda, that you're chayiv by kalim, by a bar. So wait a minute. It said by a fire, you're chayiv, bein davar haroyeloi, bein davar she'ein royeloi, ma she'ein came babar. Royeloi is firewood. What's ein royeloi? We inserted in that question mark, we inserted kalim. The problem is that would mean that you're exempt from kalim on a bar. Now you're telling me that the brisa follows Rav Yehuda, that it's chayiv in kalim by a bar. So what is that question mark that's omitted? It can't be kalim anymore. So what is it? Iba yisem l'olam Rav Yehuda, davar she'ein royeloi, lav da'asui kalim. It's not kalim, because kalim yichayiv. And la'asui licha niroi v'sicha avana. We had this a few days ago, that if let's say a fire like scorches the stones, so it doesn't ruin it, but it damages the external layer of the brick, you're chayiv to pay for it. That's something. That's davar haroyeloi, davar she'ein royeloi. Davar haroyeloi is firewood. Davar ein royeloi is like the bricks on the outside of a building that you're chayiv by eish, but you're not chayiv by a pit, because a pit can't do that to brick. If bricks fall into a pit, it's not going to be scorched on the outside. It's not something that applies physically to a bar. That's what it's referring to. So really, a bar is chayiv by kalim. Davar haroyeloi by firewood is firewood. Davar ein royeloi is not kalim. It's licking the outside of a building that you're chayiv by eish, but you're potter from a bar because it's not shayach and mitzi, is such a thing. Okay. Now, so we have two different approaches to understand this brisa. The first approach is that it follows Rabbanon and it's ton of a shire, and because it's shire something else, so we shire that. Or you follow Rav Yehuda and it's not shire anything. It's actually a very comprehensive brisa. Maskil Rav Ashi, I have another thing that's omitted. Lisni chaymer b'shar bebar. Why don't you list this? That a shar is more severe than a bar. Shashar chayev by shar b'psulei ha'mukdashim. Masha'en kin bebar. The halacha is, let's say you have an animal that was puzzle for a carbon, right? So there are certain halachas that apply to it. Even meaning you're allowed to eat it, but it has certain stringencies that are required. One of the chumras, if you have a puzzle carbon, you're allowed to eat it, but the carcass you're not allowed to feed to a dog. It's one of the halachas. You're not allowed to do this. What happens if a puzzle carbon gets gored by my ox? So you have a carbon that was puzzle. You can't bring it as a carbon anymore, so it's in your backyard. You're going to eat it later for dinner. My ox gores it. I have to pay, right? I have to pay. Why not? It's your property. But let's say it falls into a pit and dies. I'm potter. Why? Due to a technicality, because the pasuk says by a pit that if an animal dies in a pit, you could take the carcass and give it to a dog. So the carcass can be used for anything, even to give it to a dog. Now meaning that's the Torah's way of saying, I'm excluding this category. So it's due to a technicality. If you have a puzzle carbon that's gored, you have to pay. But if it falls into a pit, you're potter, because the pasuk was never referring to that. So why is that not listed? That's pretty good. So the Gemara says, so now, if you go with the first approach to explain the brisa, which is the Rabbanan of the previous discussion, and according to the Rabbanan, we concluded that the brisa is ton of a shire, it's not comprehensive. So shire anami hach, then it also omitted this psuli mikdashim. Eliyam Rav Yehuda mashai da shire. But according to Rav Yehuda, we said that it's a comprehensive brisa, it's missing this. So the answer is, whether you understand the brisa like the Rabbanan or Rav Yehuda, it's ton of a shire. It's ton of a shire. So therefore, even if you follow Rabbi Yehuda, it's shire this. What else is it shire? What else is it missing to prove that it's not comprehensive? So, shire dosh beniroi. It's shire the following case. Let's say you plowed your field. So you have it all ready to plant. It's all good to go. And then my ox just goes and plows it a second time, meaning it runs all over it, stomps on it. On purpose. So it stomps on it. So now I have to pay farmers again to redo it. It's basically undid all my work. So the halacha is you have to pay. Now that applies to a shar. That doesn't apply to a bar. Now, the reason why it doesn't apply to a bar is because it's not shaykh mitzias, but okay, but that's omitted. So the Gemara says, Shire dash benira. So that's omitted. Okay, fine. So it's ton of a shire. So the Gemara says, no. Imisham dash benira lav shir. That's not a good example of ton of a shire. Why? Because when it listed the differences between shar and bar, it said a shar travels to attack, as opposed to a bar which is stationary. That's what that meant. Like, what it meant is it covered things that a shar can travel and attack, but that are impossible by a bar just due to physics. And therefore, the hatana shekain darkei lechazik, that's what it meant when it said that a shar attacks as opposed to a bar. It means a shar can now ruin a field, but a bar cannot because a bar can't move, and therefore the field can't travel into it. That's what it meant. So therefore, that's not ton of a shire. So that really is not a good approach. Okay. Weiter in the Gemara. Now, what we're going to do until basically the end of the daf, almost the end of the daf, is the following thing. We said in the Mishnah as follows: that if I'm partially pesheya, I'm chayiv 100%. So I'm partially pesheya, I'm chayiv 100%. What does it mean? I'm partially pesheya. If you're pesheya, you're pesheya. If you're not pesheya, you're not pesheya. It doesn't mean like I'm partially. Like I did like the last straw on the camel's back. I'm chayiv. What's the case? Most cases, if you leave the door open and your ox gets out, that's not partial pshia, that's chayiv, full pshia. What's the case of partial pshia? That's what we're going to be dealing with until the end of the, almost the end of the daf. Taner Rabbanan, hechsharti mixas nizkay, if I caused partial damage because I was partially pasheya, chiyavti b'tashlum nizkay, kachshir kol nizkay, I'm chayiv, full. So Ketzar, what's an example of I did a little bit, but I'm chayiv all of it? So the case is as follows. Hachayfer bar tisha. So you dig a pit that's 9 tefachim. If you remember from a couple dafim ago, I don't remember which one. My zichru is not good this week. I'm a little off this week. I'm usually pretty solid, but I don't know what daf it is. 9 or 10 tefachim, whatever. Oh, it's probably Avos Nezikin. It's probably like daf gimel or something like that. But the point is, the Gemara was describing that you have 10 tefachim is the smallest amount that an animal could die in. 9 is you can only do damage, you can't die. So you have a pit that you dug that was 9. So it's not capable of killing anyone or killing any animal. I then just dig 1 tefach. So I didn't dig an entirely new pit. I was partially peshay. I was partially at fault. But then an animal falls and dies. I'm 100% at fault. That's an example where I did a partial act. I didn't dig 10 tefachim. I just dig 1 tefach. But what that 1 tefach was the last straw that on the camel's back. So I'm 100% chayiv. Now, it is a little bit of interesting because it's like what he did. Okay, whatever. I see it. It's my action on its own would not be enough to cause an animal to die, but his action also would not be enough. But I'm responsible because what I did is the final straw.
But the guy who did the first fucking is
not chayiv at all if the animal dies. Now, if the animal gets hurt, then the Gemara is going to say it could be we're both chayiv because at the end of the day he could have gotten hurt in 7, 8, or 9. So what I did is just. I'm not fully responsible, but for the death, I'm fully responsible, even though I was only partially, I only did a partial act, basically, a partial pshia. So the Gemara says, okay, now this concept that if the animal falls in a tefach that's 10 tefachim deep, that I'm chayiv, the last one's chayiv, not both, just the second one, deloy Rabbi. That's actually not like Rabbi. Titania, hachayver bar tisha, if you dig a pit of 9 tefachim b'achav yishlim lasar, and then the second person just digs 1 tefach and makes it 10, achrin chayiv, the last one's chayiv, and that's what we just got finished saying. Rabbi says no, it depends. Rabbi actually amends it, and he says it depends what happened in the pit. You see, the first opinion holds whether an animal died in the pit, whether an animal got hurt in the pit, the second one's chayiv, because the second one made it a bar. But Rabbi says that's actually not true. Rabbi says like this: Achar in lamisa. If the animal died, you're right. The second person is responsible because he made the pit killable. Achar shneim l'nizakim. But if the animal just got hurt, they're both responsible because it could have got hurt in a 4 tefach ditch. So the first opinion is always holds the second one's chayiv because he made it a bar. The Rebbe is, I think, actually very, it's very easy to understand, is that it depends what happened. If the animal died, then I get it. But if the animal just got hurt, then I actually think they're both responsible. So our Mishnah, which says that the second one is chayiv, is not like Rebbe. So, or you could say very simply, our Mishnah is like Rebbe, and we're talking about a case where the animal died as opposed to the animal got hurt. And that's the Gemara says. Rav Papa says our Mishnah could work with Rebbe. Just the case of our Mishnah is not the animal got hurt, the animal died. Okay, fine. Some have a different version. Do you want to say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi? The answer is no. It could work with Rabbi in the case of the animal died. Now, basically, that is the only case that we're offering where a person did a partial act, but he's 100% responsible. It's where the first person did 9, the second person did. That's the only one we're offering. And we're now going to go through other options and try to figure out why was that not offered. So the Gemara says, Maskiv lo Rav Zera v'suleka. What about the following? What about the following one? Let's say I have a very aggressive ox. So I give 5 people the ox to guard. All 5 of you have to guard it. And so all of you are supposed to tie it up, whatever. One person forgets. The animal breaks through, cause damage. So that's a partial act because only one of the person was negligent, but he's 100% chayiv. Why is that not listed? So the Gemara says, so why is that not listed? So the answer is very simple. That's not a partial act. You see, the case of the pit, one person did a little bit. He was mashlim what the first person did. On its own, the second person's actions on its own is not enough, but it's the last straw that broke the camel's back. This case of the 5 people, the reason why, if you need all 5 people to lock it up at night and one person doesn't, he's 100% at fault. What he did something that on its own the animal would damage. You see, the case of the pit, the second guy on its own, by digging 1 tefach, is not on its own enough, but coupled with the first person, it is. If I have 5 people and I need all 5 people to lock up the gate at night, and one person doesn't, he's 100% chayiv, because he basically left the door open. Because the animal needs all 5 to be locked, and by him leaving one door open, he basically left the entire. He's not a partial. That's not an example of a partial act. That's 100% of a pshia. You understand the difference? It's a subtle difference, but that's the difference. The Gemara says, "Hey chidami." The reason why it's not listed is because I'll tell you why. Ilema de belav iu loy have a minter. If all 5 people need to lock up at night, and if one person doesn't, it's mamish like nothing to this ox, then it's pshita. That's not an example. That's 100% pshia. And the iu covered. Ela belav iu nami mintar my covered. And if I need all 5 people to guard, then how did it break loose by just one? The answer is vaistachais, that if one person not locking up, the animal can break loose. And the vaistachais, that's like leaving the door wide open. That's not a good example. That's 100% pshia. That's not coupled with the other person's actions. It's 100% pshia on its own. That's why it's not listed. Let's keep going another one. Maskar of Sheshes. What about the following? What if I have a fire that's raging? Right? You started a fire and it's burning down buildings. I take firewood and I throw it on. I should be chayiv. Because my action, was a partial. I didn't make the fire, but my action caused it to damage. The answer is, why is the same problem? Why is this not listed? I'll tell you why. If the fire, let's say the fire, you made a fire, I added firewood, and then it burned down 2 buildings. I should be chayiv for those 2 buildings. Wait a minute. Would the fire have gone without me? Then I did nothing. If the fire would not have gone without me, I'm 100% at fault. So it's not a good example. Again, it's not an example. I'm 100% at fault. So the Gemara says, "Hey chidami," go to the next page. If without me the fire would not travel, then pshita, then I'm 100% at fault. Then his actions are irrelevant to mine. Or because he did a spark, that's nothing. The point is, he did not do anything that would cause the hezek. It's 100% me. And if the fire would travel without me, then my ka'av, and then what I do wrong. That's not a good example of the second person being partially pesheya but 100% at fault, because it's not partial. It's either all or nothing. So let's keep going. Maskar Rav Papa, I have another one. Now, what's interesting about this one from Rav Papa is the other Rabbanim, Rav Sheshes and Rav Zera, were offering their own ideas. Rav Papa is now going to also offer an idea, which we're also going to reject for the same reason, right? For the same reasons. But Rav Papa is going to quote a brisa. So you could reject a brisa, and you could say that's why the Mishnah doesn't like a brisa, because brisas were like the flawed, not as perfected versions. But you have to explain the brisa, so you can't just reject it because it's a brisa. Maskul Rav Papa, Ha'ikatatanya. I found the brisa that gave a case. So why is this not listed in the Mishnah? Chamisha sheyoshval safsal echad. You have 5 people that sat on a bench. V'loy shavrua, and it did not break because of their weight. Uba echad v'yoshav lo v'shivrei. And then a 6th person comes and breaks the bench. Ha'achrin chayiv. That 6th person is chayiv for breaking it, because his combined weight broke it. V'am Rav Papa, and Rav Papa said, "Going Papa bar Abba." I'm assuming Rav Papa is talking about himself. Papa said, like me, he was a larger Rav, as we'll see in the 7th parak about Mitzvah. This whole discussion about his size. He was a larger Rav, and he says, like me. I don't know why you have to add that. I guess because the point is, if he's super skinny, I guess it's like an oinus. But the point is, he said, so that's an example. Why is that not listed? So the 5 people sitting, the 6th person sits and breaks it, the 6th person is 100% chayiv. So the Gemara says, well, wait a minute. The Gemara says, hey chidami, well, I'll tell you why it's not listed, because what's the case? pshita. Now, again, if the five people are sitting there, and that won't break it at all, and that sixth person breaks it entirely from him, then it's pashut. He's 100% at fault. And the answer is it was going to break without him. So, my covenant. Then what do you do wrong? Meaning, in other words, what's the case? Because if that guy was able to break it on his own, then he's chayiv. It's pashut. He's 100% at fault. If it would break without him, then he did nothing wrong. So the answer, I think we would all say, is that, and the Gemara is going to say this, that maybe it would break in 2 hours, and because of his weight, it breaks earlier. Okay, but that's why it's not listed in our Mishnah. It's not the example the Gemara gives for our Mishnah, is because it's not a good example. Because Manoshach, would it break without him? Then he did nothing wrong. If it wouldn't break, and then he's 100% at fault, and that's why the Gemara didn't like it.
Why is it partial that if it wouldn't have broken without him,
would not have broken?
Chayev? It's only breaking with him because the first five people are sitting on it.
So the Gemara. So I'll tell you why. Because the Gemara, we'll get to it. The Gemara sort of looks at it as binary. It's like, would it break if he's the last? Then he's for sure chayiv because he could break it.
Why it's still only a partial act because there's other people. It's only broken because other people sat on it. So his additional weight. The
Gemara still looks at it as he alone, as opposed to the other one. The other one, in the case of the pit, he's just digging one tefach, which is on itself nothing. It's not enough on its own to actually do a damage. Over here, his action 100% was going to break it. The Gemara is. I understand what you're saying. I'm bothered by the same thing. The Gemara is going to address your point in a second. First, the Gemara rejected. The problem is it's a brisa. You can't really reject a brisa. You got to explain a brisa. The Gemara says, "Saif masi seichem atar." So how do you explain the brisa? So the answer is, I think this is what you're saying. The truth is, it would have broken after 2 hours, but with him sitting, it broke quicker. Hashta itbar b'chodesh, and now it broke in 1 hour. The Amrile, and the Brisa says the last one is chayiv because the other one. So why are the other ones not chayiv? Because meaning in other words, let me explain one thing. I think this is an important point to make. We're looking for a case where the second person's actions it's like the last straw on the camel back, and he's exclusively chayiv. I would actually look at when 5 people are sitting and the sixth one sits and breaks it. I think they all should be chayiv. But maybe that's why the Gemara is trying to figure out why it's not in the Brisa, it's not in the Mishnah, because it's not a great example of this. So the Gemara says the case really is as follows: it would have broken in 2 hours, but his actions caused it to break quicker. So why is he the only one chayiv? They should all be chayiv because they all led to it breaking. The reason why he's the only one chayiv is the Amrle, because they could say to him, "Ilavat have a yasmin tvei purta kaimen." We all would have gotten up before it broke. We had 2 hours. We knew we had 2 hours, but you sat on it and broke it quickly. So the reason why you're 100% chayiv, the Brisa looks at it as, I think the Mishnah would look at it as like this. He's either if he's the only cause of it being breaking, it's pashut. The answer is he's not the only cause. You needed a combined weight. If you need a combined weight, they all should be chayiv. So it's not. It's a hard thing to know why is he the only one chayiv. So the case is the Brisa. It would have broken after 2 hours, but he quickened it. He hastened it. Why is he the only one chayiv? Because they could say to him, "Why should we pay? We would have gotten up after 2 hours." So the Gemara says, "But wait a minute. Why can't he respond to them? So why didn't you get up right away?" Right? He sits down. They all are sitting there, and then 3 minutes later, the whole thing breaks. So he's the only one chayiv because they could say to him, "If without you, we had 2 hours." So he should say to you, "Well, I sat down. If you knew it was going to break, you should have gotten up a lot quicker." The Gemara says, "Well, v'lei malu." So why can't he say to them, "Ilava tum b'didi lo have a mitzvah"? So why didn't you get up? Right? Meaning, in other words, the guy is not saying he's potter. The guy is just saying, I do not understand why I'm exclusively at fault. You want to say that a mutual, we all have to pay, fine. So why am I mutually at fault? Because it was going to break after 2 hours, now it broke after 1 hour. And so why are they potter? Because they could say to him, we would have gotten up. So he says, so why didn't you get up? You should have gotten up quicker. The fact that you stayed there even for a minute, that means you're culpable. So the Gemara says, you're right. We have to amend the case. The case is as follows. He actually didn't sit on the bench. 5 people are sitting on the bench. He's leaning on them like this. And he is preventing them from getting up. So he is causing it to happen quicker. They could have gotten up without him, but now they can't get up because he's stopping them. Now he's 100% at fault. Okay. So the Gemara says, Pshita, well, isn't that pashut? I mean, the answer is, you might think that because he's not putting his body weight on the bench, he's just sort of it's his koyach, he's sort of pushing them down, but he's not putting his actual body on it. The answer is that a person's force and his body are the same. Okay. The Gemara has one more case. I have one more case where the last person does the last straw on the camel's back, where on its own would not cause a damage, but it was the last straw and he's 100% chayiv. And that is a case of murder. Let's say you have 10 people hitting a guy, and each one is hitting, and maybe each one on his own would not cause, but the last one was the final blow. He's chayiv. So that's a good example. That's case. Why is that not listed? V'suleka, ba'ika hadatanya. The Brisa says he ko asar b'nei adam eser maklis. 10 people hit him with 10 different clubs. Bein b'asachas bein b'zachazeh. Whether they're hitting him at the same time, zachazeh, kulan paturim. They're all patur, because the chacham shita is, each one is not on its own chayiv. Each one did not on its own murder him. Even if it was one after the other, the last one on its own wouldn't kill him. So it's like a tziruf of all of them. You're not going to give the death penalty unless one person kills the guy. That's the Rabbanan Shita. But Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira Omer, b'zach hazachar chayiv. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the last one's chayiv. If they hit it one after the other, the last one's chayiv. Because although his hit on his own would not be enough to kill him, but he hastened the death. So the question is, so why is that not listed? It's a biktal like Kamari. We're talking about nezek. We're not talking about the death penalty. Okay, it's not. It doesn't fit in the Brisa.
They all hastened the death, not just the last guy.
True, but the last one is the final blow, and that's an example of the final blow. Even though on his own would not be enough, but it should be 100% culpable. So the Gemara says that why is this not listed? The answer is because we're talking about nezek. This is death. We're not talking about death penalty in our Mishnah. Or Iba Yisema, plukta like Kamari. Another pshat is, who's talking here? This is not the Rabbanan. This is Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. We're not going to go with machlekes. Here's the problem. If you remember before, we had a machlekes. The machlekes before that we listed was Rabbi and the Rabbanan. So, and we said it's not like Rabbi, or it might be like Rabbi, but death. But the point is, we were comfortable with interpreting the Mishnah not like Rabbi. So why are we we don't want to get involved in machlekes? Well, we got involved in machlekes. So the Gemara says, didn't we just got finished saying that the actual pshat of the Mishnah is not like Rebbe? So we got involved in machlekes. The answer is, think about it. We're not like Rebbe, and who are we like? The Rabbanan, the majority. Now you want to interpret the Brisa like Rav Yehuda ben Beseira, not like the Rabbanan. It's not that we don't want to get involved in machlekes. We are more comfortable following the Rabbanan. If we're going to get involved in machlekes, we better follow the majority. We're not going to follow one Amoira or one Tana. Okay, let's just go a little bit weiter. I know it's getting late. I'm just a little bit, when I'm under the weather, it takes me a little bit longer to go through the daf. Okay, now the Mishnah had chavti b'tashlume nizkai. Now the word tashlume is extra. It's not really needed. Tashlume just means payment. So chavti b'nizkai, I would understand what it means. Tashlume could actually also be interpreted as hashlama, to complete. It's telling you how the payment is done. It's done through completion. What does that mean? Chavti b'nizkai lekatani. Ela tashlume nizkai. What is the word tashlume coming to tell you? Tanina l'hadatan rabbanon. Tashlume nezek. Milamed shabaylam metaplim benavela. What it means is like this. You have an ox. Yeah, the ox is worth $1,000 living. It falls into my pit and it dies. How much do I pay? $1,000? No. You have, the carcass belongs to you. What you have to do is go to the market, figure out, sell the carcass. Let's say it's worth $300. I'll pay $700 I'm mashlim. You understand? I don't pay the nezek. I mashlim the nezek. I take the value of what it was living. I take the value of what it is dead, and I pay the difference. Mashlim means pay the difference. I'm not. You keep the carcass. Meaning, there's two ways to look at it. Huh? The nizik, the one who it belonged to. It's his animal. He keeps the carcass. I pay the difference between a dead animal, living animal, as opposed to the carcass belonging to the mazik, and I just pay $1,000. That's not what it is. Tashlumi nezik means hashlama. I pay the difference. You keep the carcass. I pay you the difference between the carcass. Now, by the way, there's one very clever question the Gemara asks at the end of the daf, which is, what's the chiddush here? What's the option? The option, again, is Gavin's animal is worth $1,000. It dies. Now it's worth $300. Craziest case of mazik that's happened to Gavin in a recent bit. So the point is the animal dies. It's now worth $300. Yeah. So the chiddush of the pasuk, as we'll see in a moment, is I don't pay $1,000. I just pay the difference. You know what I could do? We said before, you could pay a nezik with meitav, you could pay with kesef, you could pay with subin. So what's the difference? Let's just say we look at it as it is my animal. payment is $300. I'm going to pay $700 cash and $300 carcass. What's the difference? I mean, what's the difference? What's the difference whether it's my animal and I'm letting you keep it as payment? Right? I could pay with shava kesef. So what's the difference in halacha? Right? We're saying it's Gavin's carcass. I'm just paying the difference.
There's a practical difference. I have to be dealing with the carcass.
Okay, so you ruined it.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Alicia, for ruining the Gemara. That's the Gemara's conclusion, that the difference is who it belongs to is also if it's depreciation in value. If at the time of the death the carcass is worth $300 and then a next day later it's down to $250, well, if it's mine, then I give it to him as payment, but now I have to make up the $50. If it's his and I'm not chayiv, then I was never chayiv for the 300. I was only chayiv for the 700. That would be the difference. So now, basically, that's the concept of the Mishnah, that you only pay the difference. You don't actually, the animal stays to the nizik. You just pay the difference. Where's the source for this? Minan imili. It's 3 psukim that give the source. Amrav Amid Amakra Make Nevesh Behemi Yishalmenu. If I strike an animal, Atikr Yishalmenu, Yashlmenu. It doesn't mean pay. It's Yishalmenu means to complete. Now this pasuk, just for the record, just so you know, this is a pasuk referring to a person killing an animal. So I kill your ox. Fine, that's one pasuk. Rav Huna Mehacha, he has a second pasuk. Now this pasuk is referring to a shomer sacher. A shomer sacher is responsible, and if let's say I'm pesheya, and I leave the ox out, I don't put it in the pen at night, and a lion comes and kills it, I also pay similar lashon. Again, I don't pay the whole $1,000. I pay the difference between a dead animal, the carcass, and so the first one was a person being mazik. The second one, mehacha im tarif yivyehu aid hatrefa lo yishalem. Right? The pasuk says ad trefa yishalem. It means I only pay up to the carcass. Trefa atzma lo yishalem. I'm not paying for the carcass. When the carcass is yours, I'm paying the difference between dead and living. It's the second pasuk. Chizkiya gives a third source. This is talking about an animal attacking another animal. So you have a person attacking an animal, a pshia where a lion attacks an animal, and then an animal attacking an animal, all saying the same thing. The question is, why do you need all three? Now the Gemara, I'm sorry. The animal belongs to Lenizik. It belongs to the Nizik, and I pay the difference. How do you know that the carcass belongs to the Nizik? Maybe it belongs to the Mazik. No, that can't be the pshat. What do you mean loikachu? So prove to me why can't that be the pshat? If you actually think that the person who damages gets the carcass and he pays $1,000, what do you need? Hamesi aloi is a chiddush that the person whose animal died, Hamesi aloi, you keep the animal. That's a chiddush. Okay. Shema min alinis. You have 3 psukim that all say the same thing. The question is, why do I need 3 psukim saying the same thing? If I just had the first pasuk, I would say mishum d'leshchiach. How common is it for a guy to punch an ox? It's not a very common thing. So maybe that's why. Again, by the way, just the one thing to remember. The concept that we're saying that I pay the difference between dead and living is helping the mazik. It's helping me, right? I don't have to pay the whole price. You have to go to the store, you have to go to the market, sell your carcass. It's helping the mazik. So if I just had the pasuk that we find this leniency by a person punching an animal, I'd say, yeah, because how common is that? It's not shchiach. Avol, treifa, the shchirach. But in the second pasuk, which is a lion attacking an animal, which probably happens all the time, emaloi, maybe that's something that it's so common. We don't want the mazik to get off the hook, and maybe you have to pay. Tzricha, that's why you need the second pasuk. V'yashmin and treifa, and if you just had the second pasuk of the torn animal, shemdim memela, I would say because that happened on its own. I wasn't involved biyadayim. Avol makeh behemi dedayim. But in the first case, where the person himself is doing the infliction, maybe why are we being lenient on him? He was mazik biyadayim. Eim aloi, maybe not. V'yashmin an entirety. And if you had these 2 psukim, I would say mishum delei shchiach, ha mishum meil. I would say either those are leniencies because it's not common, or it happened on its own. Avol hamesi aloi the shchiach biyadayim. But in the last case, where the animal is mazik, which is common, and it's my animal, so it's considered as if I did it, maybe we should not be lenient. And if we just said the last one, I would say, I would say over there, it's because your property is causing damage. But over here, where it's just your body, maybe that we're not, maybe we would not be lenient. Tzricha, that's
even worse if you're dying.
No, meaning Amesi Allah. Yeah, that's interesting. I have to check that up exactly what as far as tzricha. Now, I just want to end off with this, just because it's getting late. The last point that I made before, which is what's the difference? We're saying right now that the carcass belongs to the nizik, and I pay the difference, as opposed to the carcass belonging to the mazik. and I have to pay the whole thing. What's the difference? Even if the carcass belongs to the mazik, I could still use it as payment. So what's the difference between it belonging to the nizik and I only pay the difference, or it belongs to the mazik, and then I'm letting him keep it as payment? So what's the difference? The Gemara says, Amar le'Rav kind of le'Rav, El Taib de Amar Rachman Amesi Eloi, Halav Halchiava min Nevil de mazik have Hashi Yisleli Didei Kamma Trefus Yovle. I could pay off this nezik with carcasses. Yashiv Damar Krag Yashal Rabbi Shavakes Afilu Subin. Didei mi boy. So what's the difference? The answer is Lo Nitzcha LePachas Nevel. The answer is depreciation of value. How much I have to pay? If I have to pay the difference, then I'm never chayiv for the carcass. If the carcass depreciates in value, that's your problem because it belongs to you. But if the carcass belongs to me and depreciates, then I can't use it as payment because I can use it as payment, but I'm going to have to make up the difference. That would be the distinction. We'll stop here. Pick it up tomorrow.
Go ahead.
The reason why